Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast,
the podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Senior Rehab Podcast. Thank you for your download. I appreciate it. I'm excited for you to meet today's guest, Jamie Lowy. He is a physical therapist that works in the home health setting in California. He has a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom and a lot of really good advice for me and as well as you, the rehab clinician that mainly works with older adults. One of the many perks of podcasting is that I get to talk to a lot of people, a lot of really smart people, and I get connected with a lot of really smart people, and Jamie is definitely one of them. We started interacting online, as with most of my guests, and I've just been really impressed with his perspective and how he cares for his patients and some of the advice that he's given me and many others, especially in the private Facebook group. So I wanted to have him on just to pick his brain a little bit and hear how he treats his patients and some of the courses that he also teaches as well. So without further ado, here is a fellow listener of the Senior Rehab Podcast, Jamie Lowy. Jamie Lowy, welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thanks for having me on, Dustin. I've been kind of chomping at the bit for this one. I've been waiting a while. It's glad to finally get a chance to chat with you.
I know. I'm excited. We've been interacting a lot in the private Facebook group on Twitter, and I'm just really impressed with just how you chime in on conversations and have a lot to bring to the table, a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom. So I'm excited for the listeners to meet you.
All right. Well, I'm hope they're as excited as you are.
They will be. And in celebration of us finally getting to chat, I mentioned this before, but I broke out the birthday bourbon,
Yes.
the Woodford Reserve, which for anyone that is ever around Versailles, Kentucky, and yes, it's pronounced Versailles in Kentucky. If you are outside of Kentucky, some would call it Versailles, but it's Versailles, and it's probably one of my favorite bourbon tours. Some would disagree, like Jerry Durham would. But it's good
That's
stuff.
okay.
Yeah.
Jerry can disagree all he wants, but I've had an opportunity to have a little bit of the reserve on a Vegas trip last November that I go with some of my guy pals. So I know where your talk coming from here on that one.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's
good
lovely.
Stuff.
So let's kind of get the quick and dirty of your career.
Yeah.
Up to this point, just the path that you've taken to where you are now.
Well, I'm hopefully one of these rare people that you interview that does not come across with the, I was an athlete in high school or college or whatever.
Yeah.
I came from a completely different pathway. In fact, coming into healthcare was something that I had not actually planned to do. I got my first degree in history, and that is despite coming from a family steeped in medical, I don't know what you want to call it, dogma, because
Really?
Going all the way back to my great-grandfather, who was a physician and got his commission in the U.S. Army. I actually have his commission papers signed by President Wilson himself.
Oh my
gosh. Who was accepted into the Army Medical Corps.
That's amazing.
Both my grandfathers, my father, my older brother, all went on the medical school, and I said, you know what, this does not interest me all that much. So I got my degree in history, ended up in New England, in the Boston area, found that I was kind of tired of being in kind of dark, dank basements, looking at old manuscripts and things like that, and kind of felt maybe I should be finding a different pathway. And as chance would have it, I came across physical therapy, and I had no clue what it was, despite all my family history.
Yeah.
And I'd done some sports, I guess say. Did a lot of martial arts in high school, played lacrosse in college. So I had some idea about what it might entail, but not a clue until I finally started to volunteer in some of the therapy clinics when I moved back to the West Coast. And then my grandmother had come down with advanced colon cancer. And so we moved her from Florida to my folks' place in Oregon. And in the process of taking care of her and seeing kind of what she went through. She fell and broke her hip and went through that process of her in the hospital and the nursing home and then rehab at home. And something about that just really hammered home that this was where I was kind of meant to go in life.
So when you experienced that, with your grandmother, how old were you at that point?
I was 24, I think.
Okay.
So I was out of college, a couple years or so, and and I think that too also is where I started to develop my taste for working with older adults, because, when I go to the nursing home and I just see my grandma there, and I'd hang out in the visitor area they had and talk with some of the other folks there. It seemed so easy to kind of talk about with them, listen to their life, what they've been through.
Yeah. So where'd you end up going to school for physical therapy?
So I went to the home of the Tigers, University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, which is nowhere near the Pacific Ocean, by the way. It is smack dab in the middle of California's Central Valley. And for those that used to watch old Westerns, Stockton is famous for the TV show The Big Valley.
Yeah. So I want to dig into a few things.
Yes.
So the first thing, looking back on it now, when you were witnessing your grandmother go through rehab, how did you what is the difference between how you perceived the care she had compared to your perception now compared to back then, in terms of, what was your perception of what she went through when you were witnessing it versus, if you look back on it now, do you think, oh, they probably, should have done this, or they did a great job? Like, has that changed much throughout the years in terms of your perception?
Not so much. I think the care that she got in particular when she went to her skilled nursing rehab was really good in terms of the therapist that she had. And I actually had a chance to meet him again when I was doing one of my clinical internships. I was able to get a slot up in the Portland area near my folks, and got a chance to meet him again. And his personality was very soft spoken. He wasn't one of those kind of intimidating, the image of the physical therapist or the pain and torture specialist or whatever it is. He had that real soothing personality that really helped a lot of the folks that were very anxious and fearful. Yeah. And he could get them to do things and kind of get across that fear of theirs to stand up and do some balance activities or start to do some ambulation again when they were so scared no one else could get them to do it. And I kind of said, that's the guy I want to be.
Yeah. And that's half the battle, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to kind of dig into, so you did not go straight into PT school. So you had that history degree.
Yeah.
Did you teach much after you got the degree?
I taught almost nothing.
Yeah.
It's one of those odd stories. I had grand ambitions of getting, when we moved to Boston, of getting into a graduate program there with all of the history of our country steeped around that area, and I just fell flat on my face trying to do that.
Well,
it was very humbling.
Are there any things that stick out from that getting that degree? Just those years. Did they serve you in any way as a physical therapist? Any skills or lessons you learned pursuing that path that made you a better therapist?
Yeah. And I think it also steers me towards working with our older population, because I'm so fascinated by history and past events, and I've met so many different patients who have such a witness to things that have happened in this country or in other places around the world that it just blows my mind sometimes when I'm talking to them what they witnessed. And that, I think, helps me get a better understanding of what is it they're looking to get out of the physical therapy experience at home in particular, as opposed to what I think is best for them.
That's a good point. And I asked that because my PT school roommate he was a teacher before he went into physical therapy school. He was actually on the podcast, Steven Stockhausen. Him and his wife did the travel PT.
That was a pretty good interview. I like that one.
Yeah, they're great. They're awesome.
Yeah.
And Steven Stockhausen I was really impressed with him in school because he had that experience as a teacher, but he had been out in the real world before he came into PT school. And just there were a handful of people that had that kind of gap year of actually working. And many of us, just went straight through undergrad and then straight into PT school. And I'm just going to speak for myself, but I had no freaking clue about the real world in terms of how things worked and in terms of just adulting in general.
It's it makes a big difference. When I made the decision to go to PT school, I had none of the classes for my undergraduate degree that I could use. So I had to go back to school and start taking all of the basic sciences. And it was really different for me because I was always intimidated by a lot of those classes. And having that break and getting back into it, I was such a better student because I was more serious about what I was doing, that I could absorb that information better. As well as I was also working for a while. In fact, I did construction work because it made good money. And, I did things around my folks' house, built them a big, huge fence, and all this stuff. And I think having that chance just to live an everyday life outside of the academic environment does give you that perspective of what it is that we actually do with physical therapy once we begin to learn our craft.
That is a good point. So you're going through school, and you already kind of had a bent towards geriatrics, it seems. Tell us about just kind of your experience in terms of, work whenever you got out of school.
Well, and again, I didn't end up in geriatrics. My research project when I was in grad school involved a work hardening and work conditioning program. And the therapist that was running the program was leaving her clinic because she ended up marrying like their number one workman's compensation referral source. So
wow.
She approached me and I was just out of school and she said, you know the program, you understand what we do. How would you feel about taking this over when I have to leave? And what did I know? I go, sure, it's a job. Because I came out of school in 1998, and I think you've had a couple other guests on the show that have mentioned this. This was a very dark time in the world of PT and getting a job because we had the balanced budget, PPS changes were going on. No one was hiring. So I got a job. I took over that program. It lasted about 5 months before the corporate company that had taken over the clinic decided, they weren't going to do that anymore. So they let me go. And about 3 months later, I finally found another job at a small little community hospital in a teeny tiny little coastal California town called Hollister. So if anyone is big fans of Harley Davidson motorcycles, and there's a movie steeped in that little town. And that's actually where I started to gather my best experience because I had to do everything. Outpatient, acute floor. I had to do skilled nursing. I did worker training for the hospital for injury prevention. And it's where I started in home health too.
So what, if you had to name a couple areas that were the biggest change in terms of, the clinician coming out of that job compared to going into that job, what were some of the bigger areas that you experienced growth?
I got to feel more confident in my hands-on skills. I think the biggest thing that I felt coming out of school and going into the initial job that I did is I didn't really have a good mentor to kind of watch my back and say, okay, do this with your patients or do that, and kind of go bounce ideas off and forth. I was kind of said, okay, take over the program and do whatever you do, and just make sure that you're getting patients coming in that pay the bills. So I had to do a lot of on-the-job learning. I was fortunate that the hospital I worked for covered a couple of continuing education courses. So I went and I got Maitland trained for manual therapy, and just having a skill that I could back up onto really kind of changed how I felt I could work with patients better.
Yeah. So you kind of got some tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, I had a pretty empty tool bag at that point. I kind of look and go, okay, there's some exercises, there's some something else.
That's how I feel. Some cobwebs.
Yeah, like you looking in your tool bag, going, I swear, I just put my hammer right there and it's gone.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild. So, so then you said you went into home health.
Yeah.
Was that begrudgingly, or was that a choice that you were excited about?
Yeah, no, I was drafted. It was definitely not a choice I had made. I'd done my Maitland training. I was kind of getting comfortable with outpatient. I'd also gone and taken a wonderful course, and if I could plug someone in our area, I think I've done it a couple of times on Facebook, but Sarah Meeks, who does a phenomenal course on osteoporosis and women's health, I took her class, and that just completely blew my perspective. So I was looking at working with one of the local rheumatologists on developing some kind of bone health through the outpatient clinic for a lot of our older women in the area. And the full-time home health therapist for the hospital I worked for went on maternity leave, and the director was saying, hey, can you loan one of your PTs over to us to help out a couple of days a week? And the clinic I worked for was really small. It was me, it was the director, and it was the director's wife. So when the request to send a physical therapist over came, it wasn't like I actually had a choice.
Yeah.
And the first, I think, month, I was like, man, this just bites. I get 2 or 3 patients. I'm driving all over the place. I don't feel like I'm doing anything. And then all of a sudden I had that moment where I stop and I go, oh, wait a minute. I had an entire hour with my patient, and I don't have the aide coming in saying, hey, you're 2 o'clock here. It's early. Do you want me to get them started? I just could say, hey, we got an hour. Let's just do some stuff.
Yeah.
And that was cool. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. What other surprises did you have in terms of, what actually happened as compared to what you were expecting?
I found that I was more effective being that person with a one-on-one experience and not being as mindful of the clock. And it made me, I think, a more relaxed therapist. I wasn't always looking over my shoulder saying, okay, is someone coming in early, or what about this person? Or gosh, it'd be nice if this person canceled because they don't really do their exercises anyway. And I can get caught up on my notes. But with the home health arena, called the patient, gave them a time frame, got out there. They're always happy to see me. And one thing I found is that my impression was that the patients really didn't want to do a lot. That's why they were stuck at home. And man, was I schooled in that.
Yeah.
They work so hard. And I realized that they're stuck at home not because they want to be, because they just are. And they would give anything to be able to get up and walk to the door and go to the store or go visit friends or whatever it is, and they can't.
Yeah, and I think once you see that, that's what really opens up the gates in terms of what you can do, and the imagination really starts to kick in, and I feel like that right there is what makes, especially that setting, home health, but just geriatrics in general, very fulfilling. When you are able to kind of show people how they can, put all that effort and energy into something that's gonna help them, for sure. So I mean, you've had quite a career. What's changed in the world of geriatrics in your experience, in your career?
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm not saying anything groundbreaking, but I think we're all seeing it now with just some of the changes that have happened with how quickly hospitals turn their patients to discharge. And even in the skilled nursing environment, once they've had their 20 Medicare days, they're very oftentimes shown the door, even though they've got a whole lot of stuff that they need to do to really make that safe transition home. So I'm finding that whatever skills I had, let's say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, still have to be upgraded to meet what I'm seeing in the home these days. And I can't just rely on, I took a class 10 years ago and that should be good enough for the rest of my career. I have to stay up on top of my game because everything changes. And it's amazing how much different the expectations are, even from the insurance companies and even from some of the doctors, about what we should be doing with our patients. And I see a lot of therapists who are just kind of doing the same thing, going through the motions. Here's your home exercise plan. Here's your TheraBand. Here's your plastic bag or stockings full of soup cans. There's your exercises. Yeah. We'll do that for about 4 or 5 weeks, and I'll discharge you, and I'll see you again in 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. And repeat over and over.
Yeah, lather, rinse, repeat. You got it. It's like, you got to break that cycle. And I'm so, I think I'm kind of obsessed now with finding ways to break that cycle. And it just drives me to see what it is that I can learn to be that thing that gives my patients a little bit of something extra. So they're not going back to the hospital. So they're not having that fall at 2 o'clock in the morning when they got to get up and go answer the call of Mother Nature.
So I know this question is going to be a big fat, it depends, but
that's okay.
Let's just say like the past 10 years, what new skills or knowledge have you gained that has dramatically impacted how you treat your patients or the outcomes that you get with them?
Oh, that's not a depends question for me. That's I don't say it's easy for me to answer, but especially in the last couple of years, I've done a lot more looking into how I talk to my patients, how I approach them and discuss not just what I'm doing with them, but having a better knowledge of what the nurse is going to do with them, or the OT or the MSW, and just being able to talk to them in a way that they don't normally get, especially when they're sitting in front of their doctor. And that has just been, for me, one of the more, I think, satisfying opportunities to really engage my patient and make them feel like this isn't just an industry, and that they're not just a part that I'm taking care of because I get paid to come out and see them, that they're actually knowing that I'm invested in them getting better.
Neil Maltby from the UK is going to love you for saying
Neil and I have had some very good, he friended me on Facebook. We've had a couple of exchanges.
Yeah.
He is just a class act guy. In fact, in the class I just taught in Indiana, and what an awesome group out there, by the way, for this home health agency out in Fishers, Indiana, just outside Indianapolis. They were just bomb to work with. But I threw out there his catchphrase about lodophobia.
Yeah.
And, credit him with it. I mean, that just describes so much of that dogma I was talking about. I know you've seen it, and I know you've worked real hard to kind of break free from that stereotype that the home health clinician, or even to a certain degree, just working with older adults, is somehow, I think I used the phrase of that group, it's not very sexy. I kind of coined your phrase. No one puts us on the camera when our patients do well. I mean, you get athletes that have an injury and they go through their therapy, they'll get credited for the stuff they do, whether it's a PT or an athletic trainer. They get some accolades and acknowledgement of the hard work they do to help the athletes perform at a high level. But no one seems to think about it in terms of the older adult. And the part that, and I've been listening to a lot of Greg Lehman and listening to a lot of Adam Meekins over the UK, so my language may get a little bit salty for our listeners here, but it really pisses me off. And I made this point to the group in Indiana, and that is, this is going to be us in 20, 30, 40 years. If we're blessed to live that many more years, we are going to be the patient one day.
Yeah.
And if we can't flip that perspective to understand that this is what we're learning, is how we hope that when we're in that position, that's the kind of care that we're going to receive.
Yeah. And that's the truth. And I think Ashton Applewhite echoed a similar sentiment, This Chair Rocks author.
Yeah, I mean, you've had some really, again, I'll give you kudos because you really deserve it, even though I know you're too humble to accept it sometimes, but you've done some just phenomenal work with not just doing the interviews, but the kind of people that you have brought on. It's not just a podcast about therapists. It's a podcast about people and the people we take care of, and all of this stuff should work together. Our hopes for what we should get as care when we're older and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been wonderful for me to have this, not just because I got something to listen to, when I'm driving for an extra 45 minutes between patients, but it's a wonderful way just to kind of feel like I'm not the only person out here that thinks this way.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate you saying those kind of words. And honestly, it's almost therapeutic for me. I mean, that's a big reason why I started it, just because there wasn't something that I could listen to that really spoke to a lot of the issues that we face.
Yeah.
And the more I get into this, the bigger the rabbit hole becomes in terms of how big of an issue that we have on our hands in terms of, just ageism in general, but just, caring for older adults. And not in just the rehab sense, but in just so many different facets. It's really
the
fascinating.
whole community development thing, that was phenomenal. Listening to talk about just how we design our neighborhoods or our cities, about access for folks that are older. I mean, all that kind of stuff. We never really stop and think about it until we are the ones that are faced with that limitation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to go back to what you were saying in terms of the communication, though. So say there's a new grad listening to this, and you mentioned, that's in the past few years, that's some of the biggest changes that you've made in terms of how you communicate people. Can you give some specifics or just general principles that have guided you in improving your communication with your patients?
Yeah. So the first thing that I do is I turn off my medical brain, and I just talk to them like we're just sitting down having a couple of drinks. Yeah. And don't try and overwhelm them with the knowledge that I have, because they've already been through that with the doctor. They've already had words kind of tossed over their head that they've got no idea what it means. And quite frankly, oftentimes they say they don't even really care what it means. Yeah. They just want to know, what is going to happen to me? What is this all about? And what are you going to do for me? So, I just come off real easy. Let's figure out what it is you want to do. And I don't try and guide them to a particular answer that I want. But out where I work, I've got a lot of farmers. So I'll look around. I'll say, do you, go out before all this? Would you go out and walk around the orchards, or, what kind of stuff did you like to do? And they tell me, and I go, okay, well, let's start there and kind of figure out how we're going to begin to get you back to that point.
That's awesome. So do you feel like, does that kind of open up the floodgates in terms of just building that rapport and trust with them if you start at that point?
I think too, and again, everyone brings different experiences to the table, and so when I've worked in construction, when I look at their sheet, that I get from the agency, the referral, and I kind of go through it and learn some things about them, and then see them in their home and get to know a little bit more about them. Then I can start to talk about, what it is that they used to do and how we can use that to kind of bring forward some skills that they're not sure that they have. If they work in construction, I know they can swing a hammer. So I know we can do certain exercises that mimic that kind of activity. Or if it's someone that, was an academic. So I said, well, what kind of books did you like to read? And kind of get, a feel for what I can do to kind of have them buy into kind of what I'm selling.
I love that. And that is, it's a skill that is very valuable clinically. And that is something, people like you, like Neil Maltby, just, talking with people on this podcast has definitely opened my eyes to the importance of that. And it's interesting because one of my first continuing education courses coming out of school was McKinsey Part A. And I don't know if you've done any McKinsey training, and if anyone listening has gone through it, they know the subjective history and just kind of that examination. It's very textbook, and I know there's some wiggle room for sure, but the questions that you're encouraged to ask really don't lend to that aspect that you're talking about in terms of just really getting to know the patient, hearing them out. I guess it was more because I was in the outpatient setting, but you definitely don't feel like you're able to build a connection as, just how you're talking about, talking with the patient, just sitting down with them, asking them how things are going. But it's very, very helpful though to have people like you encourage me in that, because I was definitely bred up with the very short, pointed, yes or no questions, no open-ended questions by any means.
You have no chance for doing a subjective and outpatient like you do in home health. And Maitland wasn't that much different, it sounds like, than McKinsey. I mean, you have a script, you've got the little forms that you use to do your movement assessment, and then you just hone in on that, that shoulder or that knee, whatever it is, to start to do some testing and maybe some mobilization. So it is very, very methodical, step by step by step. I mean, I still hear one of the instructors in my class was an actual Australian, so I got his voice stuck in my head about, where you find R1 when you're doing the mobilization, because you got to find that, you got to put that in your chart. You guess where you're going to start off for your next round of mobilization. It's kind of like, okay, I don't get any of that when I'm sitting down and talking to them. And even when I pull out some of those hands-on skills, I'm a lot less OCD about them.
Yeah.
If my patient has less pain because of what I did, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
And I don't have to really give as much description in my home health notes about the manual therapy I provided, as long as I know that on my initial evaluation, when I was putting in my orders and goals, that I have an order for manual therapy on that joint.
Yeah.
Then I'm good.
Yep, you're good to go. Yeah, I guess it is a completely different ballgame compared to outpatient, for sure. What are you excited about in geriatric rehab?
I honestly think what I'm really excited about now is some of the stuff that you've been promoting, and Dr. Butcher and a few others have been really promoting about. I think Jason Falvey was another one that I listened to that is really talking about re-examining our approach to strengthening and looking at getting kind of more bang for your buck when we're in there, and coming up with a much better exercise program that is geared towards functional strength and not just, again, kicking cans in a bag.
Yeah.
I think I sent you a message earlier that I finally built my one patient up for the first time where it could actually take that 10-pound kettlebell and do some goblet squats. That's awesome. And, we'll take a little break. And then we worked on a little bit of some deadlift form. Yeah. And he's saying, why do I have to know how to do this? And I go, well, let's see. How do you get groceries out of your car?
Yeah.
And then the other one I came up with, how do you pull your pants up when you're getting off the bed or getting off the potty? So kind of pulled a little bit from my exposure and conversation with some of the OTs that I've worked with over the years and turned it into a completely different mindset for this guy. He goes, oh, well, I can do that.
And honestly, I bet with, probably some of the therapy he was exposed to before, he may have not had that direct connection between what he was doing to how it would relate to his life. In terms like seated TheraX, for example. Yes, you can correlate it to functional activities, but it may not be as easy for the patient to make that correlation as compared to a deadlift motion or squatting.
And Greg Lehman says, and I believe this too, that there are no real bad exercises. They're just exercises that are inappropriately used.
Yeah.
Because I had this conversation with one of the therapists at a class I taught about doing some plantar flexion exercises with TheraBand. And, yeah, there's a time for that. If your patient can't stand, if they're not safe to be up there, if they're doing a home program and you don't want them getting up out of their chair unless someone's there, then absolutely there's a place for these other exercises that we can incorporate. But that's not what I want the patient to walk away thinking, that's why I'm there.
Yeah, that's a good point. So tell us about your course, because you've talked about that a little bit with me, and I went across the website this evening.
Okay.
And I mean, I think our discussion of exercise and what you're excited about, definitely feeds into what you're teaching. So tell us about that course.
Well, again, I'll put in the shameless plug because I'm really skilled at doing that these days. I've been teaching now for almost a year for a company called Medical Minds in Motion. The therapist that founded it, Rick Daigle, he started a Facebook page for physical therapists, and he and I connected. We chatted a little bit, and he kind of said, what, I think you'd be really good at doing this. So, what's your skill set? What are you good at doing? And I go, I work with geriatric folks. I do work in home health. I got to be real creative with my exercises and all this stuff. Next thing you know, he's saying, well, why don't you come up with an exercise class for geriatric rehab? That's awesome. I've taken some really good courses in the past from Carol Lewis's group, great seminars and books, and they've had some very top-notch instructors, and that, I think, helped kind of solidify that the usual therapist that can't afford to go to a $450 or $500 course because their company doesn't pay for it, but they need the units, they're looking for something that they can digest in a day and turn around and see how they can incorporate some of those principles pretty early on. So I just crafted it with my knowledge of what I need when I walk into my patient's house or mobile home or whatever it is I'm walking into, and start off with just giving kind of that refresher of what we already know about aging, but then get into the whole mythology of aging. And I think it's important to recognize that as we grow as a population, the old rules don't apply anymore in many ways. And I think it's Kyle Ridgway did a lot of discussion about outcomes and measures. So I go over the ones that we use most commonly in home health, things like the Berg, and 1080 is not so much used. I think Medicare has some issues with it, but gait speed is huge. In fact, I think we spent an hour alone on Saturday just talking about gait speed. And it's important as kind of that vital sign for us as therapists to get the pulse of how well our patients are performing. And then we kind of take a very eclectic direction, which is whatever group I have in front of me. And sometimes it's just PTs, sometimes it's PTs and OTs. Then we start to discuss exercise. I just kind of go with where they direct me.
Really?
And so I've got a bunch of things I like to throw out there that I use myself, that I'll introduce certain things with, that will kind of get the conversation going about areas that they want to work on. I'll talk about total joints. I'll talk about stroke rehab. I love using walking sticks, these walking poles. They're great assets for our Parkinson's patients to learn how to do reciprocal gait patterns, or how to get them from a sitting position to a standing position without going way over into that trunk flexion to get to standing. I'll throw that out, and I'll throw out my martial arts experience.
That's awesome.
And start to dive into some Tai Chi activities with the group.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you walk away from that day with tons of ideas and actionable content, which is not always the case for many courses.
And this past weekend, I went into, I started doing CrossFit just for myself, not quite a year ago. And, I had worked for almost the last 6 years with a couple of different agencies as their therapy manager or rehab director. So I was spending a lot of time behind the desk. So when I decided to go back into the field, I was like, okay, so how am I going to transfer my patients when, sometimes I'm moving boxes in the office, and that bothers me. So I found that it's not just the patient that's benefiting from learning these exercises. I'm a better therapist because I have a better understanding of what I can do physically if I'm trying to help them out of a chair or do some bed mobility. And I was telling the clinicians, you guys got to learn these things because they can be lifesavers for you.
Yeah. My gosh, yes. Today, I mean, it was just, a couple hours ago, before we started talking here, I had a patient, and it was a couple, and the wife who was the patient was, she was, pretty independent with her walker, was walking into her bedroom to get her shoes on because we were just going to do like a warm up lap around her apartment building. And her husband, he wanted me to, it was like change the batteries on the smoke detector. And
gotcha.
And so, the idiot I am says, okay, I'll go and change the batteries out. And I stepped away from the patient, which, she had been doing just fine. And she got, her feet got tripped up and she fell. And she didn't get hurt. Yeah, it freaked me out. And this was one of those, oh crap moments that you just, that's why I'm drinking a bourbon right now because I felt so bad.
When you got to go in the office tomorrow, you got that incident report you got to fill out.
Yeah, I know. Don't tell my supervisor. What
supervisor? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So she falls and everything. Everything was okay. Just cleared any like big red flags, and then she couldn't roll over to get in quadruped and assist me a little bit. So I literally had to deadlift her up, and I was just thinking, like, my gosh, if I didn't practice this regularly, I would be screwed. She would be screwed. We would, probably be ended up calling a squad.
Honestly. For sure. And that's the point. I think it's such, you don't think about it in the home. I guess you think about the really hard to move patients, primarily being in the hospital and in skilled nursing. But you have lift teams or access to a Hoyer lift where, and again, we talk about what we have in the home. It's whatever we have in the home and us. And, to your point, I had a similar thing, except this was just helping a guy get to the bathroom. And he hadn't pooped in like almost a week. And finally things were working. Yeah. And I'm like, well, dude, let's get you to the toilet because he could barely get out of bed to walk. So, and that's like 7-8 feet to his toilet. So we got out there, finally get him on the pot. And of course I'm looking at it going, oh, there's no commode seat. Well, he's got to go. So we'll just figure it out. He can probably stand up and help me out a little bit. He was done. He was so exhausted. You can imagine after a week that he couldn't stand up.
Oh, my.
And I'm like, oh, brother, okay, how is this going to work? And it's not a small, it's a 235-pound guy.
Yeah.
Who is now dead weight. So, I got down there. I got into my nice, good tuck. Got the hip hinge working for me as best as possible. Of course, I didn't have a lot of room, so my knees are jammed together like a hockey goalie. And I said, okay, we're going to do this. And he goes, oh, I don't think so. I said, don't worry. Just you know what? When you start to feel yourself lifting up, then get your hands on the walker and give me a little push-up once we get there.
That's awesome.
So we went, fired it up, and like, next thing you know, he's up, he's standing. I kind of looked around going, how the hell did I do that?
That's awesome.
So it's absolutely. And the next morning I woke up and I go, no, my back feels fine.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah. That's the truth. So I was going through kind of your syllabus, and there's one thing that I wanted to ask about. I don't want to give away the whole course.
No, go right ahead, because it changes. So don't worry, you can give anything away.
Okay. Towards the end of the course, this section is about impactful exercise planning, and one of the sections is social networking with exercises. Could you talk about that?
Well, it's one of the things that I'm finding, again, some patients are pretty savvy about how they go about our technologically changing world. And I found some patients that are, they're on Facebook, they're all this other stuff. So I talked to them about, have you thought about connecting with some of the other people that you socialize with and talk about your exercises? And it's kind of like having that group therapy class where people kind of feed off of each other and kind of support each other and kind of give them that motivation. For some of my older male patients, there's always a little bit, especially if they were a jock or whatever, there's a little bit of competition still in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of like, is your friend Bob, who you told me was doing therapy? I said, what kind of exercise is he doing? And who's doing better?
Yeah.
Why did you challenge Bob to a squat contest?
Yeah. That's a good point. You probably experienced some of that yourself. I mean, not necessarily online, but in CrossFit, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. I'm my own worst enemy. I'm like, I can lift that. Oh, I can't lift that. It's like the next day, kind of like, yeah, okay, that was dumb. All right, okay, I won't do that for another week.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's there. And then, one of the things, and I think there are already some products out there too that are helpful at this. I think MedBridge makes one, but there are exercise programs through the intraweb that you can create programs and then email them to your patients. And so you can kind of track them too, because whenever they sign into the site and they do their exercises, it logs that they signed in.
Wow.
So one of the ones that I use, and again, I think I've put it on my little list. I'll promote them. It's Web Exercises. Okay. Dave Cruz, who's actually a chiropractor, who's just loves thinking about exercise, and I had a chance to meet him at a class that I took, and he is just a really, I don't want to say down to earth kind of guy when it talks about exercise, but he's got a good handle on it, and his site allows me as a clinician to not just pick from like 3,000 different exercises. I can create my own protocols, and then I can email them to my patient. And so they get full access to my plan. I don't have to hand them a sheet of paper unless I want to. They can look at that, or they've got the kid with an iPad. They can pull it up, and they can do their exercises. I get to see that they've done them. Not so much to be kind of big brother, but at least know that if they're given it an attempt. Yeah. So when I come back the next visit, I say, how'd it go? I saw that you looked at the exercises, but were there any ones that you had any problems with? And then we can have a better conversation about what we might need to change, what worked, what didn't, was it too intense, was it too easy, and just get a better opportunity to make some adjustments midstream and not wait till a week or whenever I got to do that 30-day reassessment for Medicare.
Yeah. Yeah, that I feel like that's going to be super helpful. I mean, now, but then as that continues to grow in the future, and especially our patient population, it's going to become more and more in tune with using that type of technology. I mean, it's going to be, super helpful, I think.
Absolutely. So
let's wrap things up with some of the rapid fire questions. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got a patient after this, so let's see here. Your responses don't have to be quick by any means. So.
Knowing me, they will rarely be quick, but I'll do my best.
All right. If you could talk to the 25-year-old Jamie, what would you tell him?
I'd tell him, keep the dream going. Because back when I was 25, being a physical therapist is what I wanted to do, but I had my doubts that I was going to have the skills to do it. In fact, my other passion is cooking. So my backup plan to not getting into PT school was going to culinary school. So I would have told myself back then, you know what? Just enjoy the passion of cooking, but for God's sakes, stick with PT. You're gonna love it.
I gotta mention my other PT school roommate, John Smorrell. I think I've mentioned him a couple times on this podcast, but I'll never forget this. It was our first day of PT school. And we went around the room, and all our professors, the faculty, were in the room, and we all had to say why we were in PT school. And everyone had all these heartwarming stories. I want to help this person. I want to, change the world. I want to improve population health, all this stuff. And my roommate goes, because I want to own a diner someday. He saw PT as the ticket to where he could make a bunch of money and open up a restaurant. So
the question I have is he there yet?
He's a pretty successful physical therapist. He is not a successful restaurateur, whatever you would call it. So he doesn't
have it. So we can't gather a group, because man, that would be a diner that I would want to go to.
Yeah. He does some barbecue competitions though.
If anyone's
in Central Kentucky, look up John Smorrell. The dude can roast a pig like none other.
Nice.
For sure. So what are some of your favorite pieces of technology or apps or equipment
Well,
that you haven't mentioned?
App-wise, thanks to you, I have a brand new app on my phone, thanks to a wonderful interview you did recently. I now have the app for my favorite assessment test, the short physical performance battery.
Oh, yeah, Rachel Walton-Mao. She's impressive.
And I got the GateSpeed app. I mean, this thing is great. I mean, I just got my phone ready to go, click it and go. It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a simple guy, and I know you've mentioned this a few times, and sometimes when we've been in home health long enough, it's very comfortable to get a little lazy. And I just don't want to sit there and do calculations either in the patient's home or in my car or at my desk in my office at nighttime. I just want the answers. I can put up my note and move on. So that has been great. Yeah. I'm finding now, too, that I still use TheraBand and TheraTubing, but I have a small but growing collection of different kinds of weights, you know, some kettlebells, some barbells. I designed my own wand weights just by going to a hardware store, buying some irrigation pipe and a bag of sand.
Nice. Huh. That's impressive. And those are really helpful. I got one of those. I didn't make it, but I got one at a Goodwill. I was at a few weeks ago. Those are super useful.
And then I make little obstacles. Same thing with the same irrigation pipe. I make these little hurdles. So it's about a 6-inch height hurdle, and it's about 8-10 inches wide, so they can't step around it. I first designed it so I could use it to test with a dynamic gait index test, doing a step over and step around. But turned out it's about the same height as a curb or some stairs. So I use it just to give them a sense of how well they can clear their foot over something without actually, if they catch their toe on it, it falls over, no one trips, and we're all good and pick it up and try again.
That's awesome. Were you the one that shared, I can't remember, it shared a picture of milk jugs and marked the level on the milk jugs in terms of...
That was someone else. I think that was someone else. But I like it. I mean, milk jugs are great. Boy, you know, a half gallon is what, 4 pounds, thereabouts. You know, full gallon's about 8. So you can really do some good stuff with some simple things, or, you know, whatever's in the patient's garage works well too.
Yeah. What's been what has been your favorite continuing education course that's helped you as a geriatric clinician?
Holy smokes. Boy. Now that's one I'm not sure I can answer, because I've taken so much from all of them that I've taken and just kind of thrown into my tool bag, that I can't really say that one was better than another. I really liked the class I took years ago by a guy by the name of Dr. Stephen Tepper. I think he's out. I want to say he's out in Maryland, but he taught this frail adult, kind of going into all of these different pathologies, whether it was CHF, diabetes, all this stuff. Did a phenomenal job teaching the class. And I remember bumping into him at CSM in San Diego. It was back in 2010, and just chatting with him about stuff. And that was a pretty influential course for me in terms of just how I began to approach patients with these multiple comorbidities. To not be quite so intimidated about them, that I can actually do something useful for them. And again, we're not just doing ankle pumps with our patients who've got edema. We're getting them up, we're moving them. And he said, even if the patient's goal is just to be able to get up from the recliner chair and walk to the bathroom and back without feeling like you're climbing Mount Everest, that's a good goal. You can work towards it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll look him up and put the links in the show notes for
he's with again, he's with Carol Lewis's group. I hate to, promote the competition of other geriatric classes, but he does such a phenomenal job that I think anyone who has a chance to take one of his classes will definitely take something away from it.
Yeah, after they take yours.
Yeah. You know what? Again, I'm the appetizer, I guess I'd say. And if you're happy with the appetizer, eating a la carte, by golly, pay your check, and you will see you again some other day. And I'm actually starting a new class this summer. I went ahead and got certified. I guess it's probably a good course to mention too, as far as influence. I took a kinesiology taping class, and I kind of took it thinking, I've heard about this. I've seen athletes wear it. I don't really know what good it's going to do me. And I took the class, and it's interesting stuff. It's a good tool for some patients.
Yeah.
Some, it doesn't matter, but I've had some patients, especially some of the patients with chronic pain, where it acts as a way just to kind of almost distract them from that sensitivity.
Yeah.
Just so I can begin to do other stuff with them. And I know you've had Dr. E on, and I actually have his Edge tool now.
Yeah.
Little things like that just kind of change up the patient's sense of the world around them and allows me to finally kind of get into their system and do some exercise and get them better.
Yeah. I think Dr. E would say you're creating that window of opportunity to
That's right.
to make some change.
And I've used that phrase quite a bit in the weeks or months since I heard you guys interview with him, because it really that's what I want. That's what I'm trying to tell them all this time. And finally someone put it in a way that I can actually digest and regurgitate back to my patients meaningful.
Yeah, he's good at that. All right, so last question here.
Yes, sir.
Every geriatric rehab clinician in the room, you got their attention. What would you want them to know?
I would say tipping waitresses are working pretty hard. I have this, and I don't know if maybe it's a genetic defect that I have. I'm not intimidated getting in front of crowds. Public speaking, for whatever reason, for me, is not a death sentence like it is for a lot of other people. And I think that kind of makes me crazy to a certain degree.
Yeah.
My wife would say that, I'm sure. But I would go back to the point and remind them that your patient is going to be you one day. And so when you're looking at what your plan is going to be, or you got that patient that's just driving you nuts because either they're not compliant or they're just not getting better, and you're ready just to kind of throw in the towel and say, screw it, I'm done, let someone else take care of this. Have that step back moment and think, okay, how quickly do you want someone to give up on you? Maybe you don't have the answers. Maybe what you're doing isn't the right approach, but don't give up in the sense that you're just going to throw in the towel. Yeah. Maybe you then talk to one of your colleagues and say, what can I do? And maybe they've got some ideas. Maybe they even want to come out and join you on a visit and give you some feedback, what they find. But don't just, walk away and say, okay, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, that's a good point. Those are wise words, and I know that will stick with me for sure, and stick with many of the listeners. And it echoes a lot of what Ashton Applewhite said, that we are all old people in training, and there's not too much difference between us and our patients.
Some of us have had a lot more training than others, by the way, Junior.
Fair enough. So you're active in the Senior Rehab Project Facebook page, so people could pick your brain there. What about Twitter? What's your Twitter handle?
I am on Twitter. It is JPT Lowy. Okay. I now have officially 21 followers. So Kim Kardashian, look out! I'm catching up to you.
You do have the best Twitter profile picture, though.
Oh gosh, that one, yes. You like my Kramer shot?
Well, the woman deadlifting and the
oh god, that's a beautiful photo. Oh
yeah. When
I flash that one to my class, everyone's kind of like, oh, what is that? I'm like, this lady deadlifts more than I can, and she's,
yeah,
she could have been my grandmother.
Yeah, for those that haven't seen this picture, it made its rounds on the internet a few months ago, but it's basically this woman deadlifting a lot of weight with a barbell, and the meme, the font says, excuse me, what color TheraBand did you want me to use? And
exactly.
Just,
God, that's
sarcastic
great. I love it.
Manner. So, and I'll put links to your courses and then some of the other things that you mentioned throughout the podcast, the apps that you use and all that stuff. So
again, we've got, when they go to our course website, again, I'm starting a new class. I think my first class is at the end of June. It's a kinesiology taping class for aging folks, and it's going to be in Sacramento and South San Francisco the last weekend in June. I don't know my other locations yet, so when those get posted, people can look. But we have a ton of other classes. that people might be interested in too, to help with their older adult patients.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, sir. I appreciate your time and just your willingness to share, just what you've learned throughout the years.
I'm just happy you got a chance to drink some more of that bourbon on my account. That's very flattering for me.
I know. I appreciate it. And I hope you do well with that patient that you got right about now. Tell her I apologize for keeping you. And now
no problem. She's I mean, I could spend another hour just talking about her and her trials, her experiences. It is just one of those things that, makes you feel like you're doing something for the right reasons. When someone has fought so hard after being a phenomenal athlete and had all of that just taken away in a flash, and you have an opportunity to help them get that life back, man, there is nothing that you could pay me in dollars or booze or fancy cigars that I like every now and then to just replace that moment where you see some magic happen.
Yeah. Amen to that. Well, thank you, sir. And go change some lives there.
You got it, brother. I'm on it.
All right. Hit me. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. The show notes and much, much more can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. I want to encourage you to go there so you can join me and many others in the movement that's changing the face of geriatric rehab. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com, click join, and you'll be able to get access to our private Facebook group, which can basically serve as your virtual mastermind group. You'll get a short and sweet monthly email from me with useful links for you and your patients. And lastly, you'll get 10% off your first purchase from the Senior Rehab store. So all of this can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. And until next time, my friends, do not forget to stay funky.